Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest webinar with the Barzinji Institute of Global Virtual Learning, where we're going to talk about combining virtual learning with in-person travel. My name is Elena Tierno. I'm the International Programs Coordinator at Shenandoah University. I am also the academic coordinator, and in my spare time, I am a music history professor. And Nada, do you want to introduce yourself? Nada will be moderating the chat, recording, doing other things.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Nada Abdel Malek, and I'm the administrative assistant at the Office of Global Engagement at Shenandoah University.
And I'll be moderating this webinar, and I'm probably the most appropriate one to do so since I work with both COIL virtual exchange and in-person travel, or faculty-led trips and uh, student exchanges. And I'm also a professor who someday will probably lead one of these trips myself. And like I said, this webinar is hosted by the Barzinji Institute for Global Virtual Learning. The Institute collaborates with institutions of higher education around the world to explore the similarities and differences in their missions and practices, to understand the challenges that they face, and to create solutions in light of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And we do these webinars. We also facilitate COIL workshops for faculty that are open to any faculty member around the world. We usually do these workshops about twice a year, and our next open workshop where everybody can join will be in the fall, starting probably in August or September. So if you are interested in doing a COIL workshop with us, let us know, send us a Nada or me a direct message in the chat, and we will record your email address and send you more information about our COIL workshop. Vicky, Kathy, and I actually were in the very first cohort of COIL faculty members at Shenandoah, the very, very first workshop that we did. And Vicky is a professor in the Applied Behavior Analysis program at Shenandoah. Kathy is a professor in the Division of Education and Leadership, and I will let them introduce themselves further and what they do and take it away.
Okay, thank you. I will share my screen. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We have intentionally titled our presentation Expanding into Blended Mobility, because that's exactly what Elena was sharing, is we do combine our face-to-face with our virtual exchange programs. As she said, I am Vicki Spencer, professor in applied behavior analysis, and I have been at Shenandoah now for 6 years, but done a great deal of work internationally. My focus has been inclusion in the field of international education, which has ended up in a roundabout way allowing me to partner with Dr. Schiffman to do the ongoing work that we do. And with that, Kathy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, hello everyone, and thanks for coming this morning or evening, wherever you are. My name is Kathy Schiffman. I am a professor, and I coordinate a professor of education leadership and policy, and I coordinate our Doctor of Education and Educational Leadership program. And I've been here for about 17 years. I have a longstanding interest in international education, and am very interested and have been very interested in how I can expand opportunities for my students who are adults in a doctoral program to have international learning experiences. So it has been great to partner with Vicki, because I think we have like minds on this, and we have a lot of fun sort of collaborating on these things. Okay. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover, and what we thought we'd do is sort of go through this, and if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or write them down. But maybe we'll we'll sort of have a time for discussion afterwards. So we'll sort of save most of the questions for the end, in case we actually may be answering the question you have. But if not, we would love to talk about it. So, briefly, we wanted to talk about a little bit about our approach to what we call global experiential learning, GEL at Shenandoah, and virtual exchange, what we see as the strengths and limitations, our sort of forays into blending those two pieces. So our global experiential learning, short-term study abroad type experience with virtual exchange. And we've tried that out in Australia and Scotland. Some of the learning opportunities that we see in preliminary evidence of student outcomes, some of the curricular instructional components we've tried, and so far what we're seeing as our strengths and challenges, and then future directions and questions.
So we decided to start out with defining terms because, as you know, you're probably familiar with all of these terms if you're in this field at all, but different institutions define them differently. So we wanted to start out with putting out there how we define them when we're working on our projects. So you'll hear us say GEL, and we thought, well, who knows what GEL is except people from Shenandoah University, but that's our term for short-term study abroad programs that you can get for academic credit. So what Kathy and I do is ours are actually courses. So students do get academic credit for a project that they do with us. And virtual exchange, you're all probably very aware of that, is just using technology to connect students from different countries and cultures. Embedded in that is COIL. And actually, that's where we really first got involved. I met Kathy, I met Elena, I met Eunice Mirza, which I know most of you probably already know Eunice, who heads up the Barzingi Institute. And that's where we began putting together our COIL projects globally, but we weren't doing anything where we were traveling and meeting face to face yet. However, I will say that myself and Kathy and probably Elena, we had already been doing a little bit of virtual exchange, but we didn't know anything had a name yet. We just enjoyed working with international partners. And then we have now moved into what we're calling blended mobility, which does combine the physical and the virtual collaboration. That I certainly wasn't possible when we were in the era of COVID. We were very strong into just COIL or other virtual exchange programs. But then once the travel bans were lifted, we were allowed to kind of explore what would this look like if we moved into blended mobility. So thanks to Kathy, she did this map, which I think really shows what we've been doing and where we've gone. It's our international education work and partners thus far. And I do want to highlight that we are multidisciplinary in what we do because of the field ed leadership and mine being behavior analysis, inclusion, anything in the field of special education. But it has worked very well because wherever you've got international leaders in education, they certainly have a component that deals with inclusive practices. So it actually has been a very nice match. When we first started out, we were doing, well, you'll see GEL only. That the earliest trip, Kathy led a trip to Finland, and it was just in 2018. So this was pre-COVID era. And you'll see our last one was actually just a few weeks ago. It was in March over spring break where we were in Cape Town, South Africa. COIL only, you can look at those dates too. Kathy has been working with the University of Sarajevo. With my training, when I was first doing COIL, when I went through the training, I was partnered with IIUM in Malaysia. And that project, if you see the references at the bottom, you'll see it's actually published what Hamza and I did at IIUM. And then I had taught previously at Dar al-Hikmah University in Saudi Arabia, so I still have connections with faculty there. And actually, they reached out to me about doing a COIL project. We did that within the field of special education. So that was not cross-discipline, but it would certainly moved us into another country in the Middle East. Then you will see our blended mobility. When I talk about that I'd done some virtual exchange before I knew it was called something, I had a colleague at Curtin University in Perth, Australia, that I had done some work with. And when I went through the COIL training, I contacted her and I said, we did COIL. And she's like, well, what's COIL? So then I began to explain it to her. And at the same time, she found out that their university had also hired someone to head up COIL programming at Curtin University. So we actually, in 2023, had the opportunity to take our students, and this was our first trip where Kathy and I combined with our programs and took students to Curtin University. And I will talk more about that program as well as the next program, which was in 2024. We did the same thing with our students going to University of Glasgow, and Kathy's going to be talking about how we implemented that project with Scotland.
So one of the things I think that's intrigued us is how can we sort of bring together the strengths of short study abroad, a GEL, and virtual exchange to sort of build on, the strengths while sort of compensating for what isn't as powerful for each of those, So for a short-term study abroad or a GEL, you have this immersive experience. You go someplace, right? And you just experience it in a way that it's hard to replicate. It tends to be short by definition and maybe more one-sided, right? It's of enormous benefit to the person going. The virtual exchange piece, particularly a COIL, allows certainly broader access. Those who may not have the resources to travel and or the motivation. This is a way to broaden access to an international learning experience. And it's an opportunity, particularly in something like a COIL, where you have sort of a project to collaborate on. It's an opportunity to build relationships and do some sort of intercultural group work. So what happens when you put those two together? And these are some of the areas that we're seeing some preliminary evidence of positive outcomes. Certainly the opportunity to practice intercultural communication, intercultural awareness, the opportunities to expand professional networks beyond one's immediate surroundings to partners overseas. Certainly an opportunity to build professional expertise, expanding sort of global awareness, and then opportunities for personal growth.
So I thought it would be helpful maybe just to start out and show how I formatted this first Australia COIL GEL program that Kathy and I did. And if you're familiar with COIL, you will see that we actually followed the COIL format for this, starting out with a driving question. And our driving question was, how are Australia and the United States addressing UN Sustainable Development Goal number 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all? Well, we initially started out, we'd already built this relationship with my colleague at Curtin University. We initially started out with Kathy and Cindy from Curtin University, met, and then kind of laid out what our outcomes were, what we were hoping for this type of partnership. And then we moved into thinking, well, how are we going to have our students work in teams? So initially, we did an initial Zoom meeting with our students and with the students at Curtin University who weren't sure at what level they would be involved yet, because obviously there's a great deal of difference in these programs, in these college programs. But the students had a chance to introduce themselves and talk about their areas of interest. Now, if you will notice right next to the word teams, I put introductions on private group site on LinkedIn. To do our projects, we actually run these projects on LinkedIn, and I set up a private group site. You cannot make your group private if you don't do it when you're initially setting it up. It's not difficult to do. When I set up a private group site, it takes, I don't know, 1 to 2 minutes. It's very quick, it's very efficient. But then only those who I give access to it can even get into that private group site. Why do we use something like LinkedIn? Because those of you who maybe use Canvas at your university or Blackboard, you use some type of system that not everyone has access to depending on what country they're in. So, and actually it was my colleague in Malaysia that recommended using LinkedIn because they didn't have access to Canvas where they were working. And it's worked out really well because you can get a LinkedIn account for free. And that's beneficial in many of the countries where we work, where, these different types of things can be quite expensive. So there we have our students go and introduce themselves. We also had asked a few questions for them to answer when they introduced themselves. And that is how we came up with the topic area options. So we didn't just come up with this list. As our students introduced themselves and answered some questions about their own areas of interest and their fields of study, this was the list that was generated. And so once we moved forward, students were assigned in these teams. However, even though they had met each other virtually, we did not place them in teams until we arrived at Curtin University, because we opened up with just a reception, so students got to really engage and meet each other. And then the final project was developing a short professional presentation on their particular topic area and develop a conference proposal to submit with their team. So just a few highlights from that particular trip. That first picture in-person planning meeting with Curtin University and SU students, that was just one of the groups that very first night where they were just kind of getting to know each other, talk about their topic areas they had expressed interest in. And we were able to put them in groups where they already knew that they're going to have that same focus on their particular topic area. We also had the chance to visit some schools, which is always a highlight for us. And when we're partnering with a country, that's something that we're always very interested in doing, is going to different schools, looking at the leadership. The principal is often one that will show us around, meet with our students, also with students who are very interested in the inclusive practices, taking us into some classrooms and maybe allowing us opportunity to meet with teachers and also special ed teachers. And we see a big variety of schools, because depending on what country you're in, they may be public, private, NGO schools. So it's a great opportunity to get to go into those schools. I want to be clear, though, our focus is to exchange ideas and learning from each other. We're not there to just impart knowledge. That's not our role. Our role is how can we work together to build this network, to have a really great exchange of information and ideas from each other. And then what I did at the bottom, when I said that the assignment was this presentation on their topic area and possibly presenting at a conference, you may not be able to see it very well, but our team here did behavioral skills training and classroom management for pre-service teachers. And then another one of our teams did Pride in Education. This actually ended up being accepted, and they presented it at a conference because they developed a website on inclusion. And you can see what I did was I put the heading of their initial web page, which was also the initial slide for their conference. So that group has continued to work some together. We had a number of other presentations. I'm going to say probably 6 total. Kathy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had about 6. And they were interdisciplinary teams working together, students from both universities working together. They did not get this project done that week. What they did is we had met before the trip. They worked together and kind of drafted out some things they wanted to do while we were meeting in Australia. But then they actually worked in small groups after we returned to put their presentations together. They continued to meet as groups on their own if they wanted to do it through Google Meet, through Zoom, however they wanted to meet up. That was up to them and then we were available for them to reach out and ask questions if they wanted to. But this was really something that these students put together. And they were graduate doctoral students. We may have had 1 or 2 undergrads at Curtin University, but we do cross that bachelor, master, and PhD level with our projects. It's not just focused on one particular level of schooling.
So Scotland was a little bit different and maybe offers some interesting comparisons. So while Cindy at Curtin University was very familiar with COIL, that was not the case with our partners in educational leadership at the University of Glasgow. But they were highly interested in engaging and exchanging. So we sort of did something a bit different. The course itself for Shenandoah was focused on going to Scotland, taking a group to Scotland, learning about, the education system, comparing professional learning for teachers and leaders, comparing implementation of curriculum and assessment, looking at the policy impacts for equity and special education populations, and then comparing inclusive practices. And so our GEL course included a virtual component followed by in-person exchange, an in-person exchange school, and then reflection. And I think reflection has been an important aspect of the programs that Vicki and I do. So I'll talk through how this worked in Scotland. So as I said, we had an amazing group of collaborating faculty at the University of Glasgow School of Education, and specifically educational leadership. And they were very interested in how could we have our students interact and learn from and with their students. 2 of the professors were working with students who were in a principal preparation program, and they were working on a strategic change initiative around these 4 themes: curriculum development, inclusion, pedagogy, and school culture. So we ended up designing the sort of interaction and the experience around those 4 themes. So we were able to do a preliminary introduction in April between the students in their principal preparation class and our students. So that poses challenges for adult learners, right? At the time, I guess Scotland was 5 or 6 hours, 5 hours ahead, and our students are working. So our students, were able to get an hour in the middle of their school day in order to meet with the Glasgow students. From there, we went to Scotland, and we had this photo in the lower left-hand corner shows the follow-up conversation. So here, our students and their students are meeting in groups to talk about one of these themes and comparing them. Those themes also guided our school visits. So we went to primary and secondary schools in Glasgow. And then you also see our students meeting with the faculty. So Glasgow, I think University of Glasgow also, I guess like most British schools have a very sort of set curriculum requirements. So to really put a coil into the experience wasn't feasible, but again, we were able to do this sort of blend of virtual and in person. So what came out of this in the moment was these mind maps. So we had our groups sort of develop a mind map to identify challenges and opportunities around particular themes. So one is looking at inclusion, and another one I think is looking at school culture. I can't remember which. So those were products we had sort of at the time, and what this has allowed is some continued collaboration. Tomorrow morning, I am collaborating with one of the University of Glasgow faculty members to have a sort of informal peer-to-peer education discussion. And we will be, I have like 15 Shenandoah students. She has her principal preparation students, and they're going to talk around, do a similar model of these themed discussions. Personally, I've continued to collaborate with those faculty. And then my students have reached out to the Scottish educators they met to sort of brainstorm around some of these themes, like school culture or, let's say, for example. So while this is maybe a less structured virtual exchange, it has had some traction in terms of encouraging a relationship to continue, at least for some. So let's see. Okay, so what we can see as strengths for blending is you're combining the benefits of virtual and in-person exchanges. So you're able potentially to develop a bit more of a relationship between the students from the two countries, and that's enhanced, we think, by having that in-person contact. The doing this personalizes the experiences and the connections, and we're sustaining interaction again over time. One of the sort of limitations of a in-person short study abroad trip is, it's of most benefit to the people going for the visit, and it's a short experience. You don't have the time to develop relationships. So a COIL, for instance, allows for sustained interaction, particularly if you have a shared task to work on in the case of a COIL. And then we suspect this deepens cultural and linguistic awareness by virtue of going and then participating in shared tasks over time.
And as with anything that you do, there's always some challenges that arise. But if you've been involved in virtual ed, some of these will be very familiar to you, because I think a lot of them are consistent across working globally and through virtual education. So one of the challenges is seeing the value of engagement for hosts. So especially if this is very new to them, and thinking, well, why would we want those educators to come over here and meet with our students? What would be the benefits? And for students and faculty in other countries who've never even, they're just not familiar with anything like this, sometimes trying to explain to them there is value to being able to do this. But at the same time, they, just like faculty everywhere, we all have a tremendous amount of commitments and things that we have to do with and for our university and our students. So again, we're asking them to kind of go beyond what they're, maybe charged with doing. Invest in participating as host, which continues from that. It's workload, it's scheduling, community outreach. All of those things or something that your host has to take into consideration. And when we say scheduling community outreach, we're asking to go into schools. That is a tremendous ask because somebody's got to set all that up and get permissions for you to go into those schools. And that is very time consuming. And we have found sometimes our partners have to reach out, to more than one or two schools before they get a yes. And sometimes they have to get approval from higher up in the admin within that school system to be able to have a group of teachers, students go in and visit the schools. Another challenge is aligning curriculum and outcomes. As we've seen, we are, going across disciplines. So what we're focusing on, there may be some differences in what we're looking at in terms of curriculum and certainly outcomes. But when we initially meet with the faculty that we're going to be partnering with, we can work to ensure that we do have some of the same outcomes. Now, they may look different in the way we're going to implement them, but we can always work together to align the curriculum and outcomes. For example, we may have one or two of the same assignments with us and our partner, but then they may have, based on what we're doing, another one or two assignments that just their students are doing based on the project. So we don't have to align every single thing. And then navigating differences. We can never forget the whole issue of time, being the 6-hour time difference with Scotland, the 12-hour time difference with Australia, the 8-hour time difference with South Africa. I mean, these are significant time differences. And so it also takes a lot of effort, like Kathy was saying, when their students were in class or could meet, our students were working. So you have to be real creative sometimes with how you're going to get together and meet. And then, that addresses schedules and then technology. What do you have access to? And again, I mentioned LinkedIn because that's a site where our students have all been able to access. However, you may have a university that their students are not allowed to use LinkedIn. So you do have to kind of mediate those things and figure out what's going to work best for your team. But you have to just be so open. You can't go into it like, well, we use this and this and this and this. Because when they come back and say, well, these are the things we use, then you coordinate and see what's going to work best for all of the students.
So we are very much learning as we're going. So these are some of the things we've learned thus far, and after this we look forward to some discussion and any insights you all have. I think we found it's important to clarify how blended mobility supports course and program objectives, and then prioritize that. So, for let's take Scotland for instance. Our priority was that our students have these sort of knowledge and experiences of the Scottish system. For our Glasgow counterparts, they had this strategic change initiative that was part of the curriculum. And so we looked at how could we combine those in a way that was mutually beneficial. How can we need to assist our learners to understand how this experience relates to their goals. How can we sort of tap into and apply the prior knowledge and professional experience they bring. I think a key piece, and this is true of whether it's just virtual exchange, just short-term study abroad, and maybe even more so with blended mobility, sort of managing expectations, because it's fluid. It may work, or things may need to be adjusted. So I think in our work with students, we sort of emphasize what is important is that you have this exchange with others. The quality of the assignment, we want it to be a strong assignment, but don't lose sight of what's most important. It's having the interaction. And then, at least for our students who are working, sort of recognizing that balancing the multiple priorities they are sort of contending with is a factor, particularly when we're talking about time differences in the related to the virtual exchange. Prioritizing reflection, that's sort of throughout the international ed literature, but we found that's really critical for helping our students sort of make sense of and connect what they're seeing, what they're hearing from others to their own professional sort of knowledge and experience and roles. And it's a great opportunity to explore intercultural team processes. And then, how can we, prepare our students for working in intercultural teams? What can we do in terms of providing, preliminary reading or activities about teams, talking about intercultural communication before our learners connect. So with that, I will stop sharing and see what questions people have.
Or comments.
Or comments, yeah.
Or concerns.
Yeah.
So feel free to raise your hand or to put questions in the chat. We'll be watching everything. Kristen?
Hi, yes. So I'm from University of Maine at Augusta, and I'm just wondering your thoughts or if you have some insights and perhaps some advice on sort of the impact of the political climate on some of these exchanges right now, where, if we're looking to sort of build trust and convince partners and perhaps encourage an exchange back and forth, right? Where the political climate is sort of anti-global right now in the United States. How do you navigate that? Do you have thoughts?
Well, I have grave concerns. I'm just going to be honest. I do have concerns about this. This is all so new in terms of what's happening at the administrative level. So we can't say really how it's going to affect what we do. But I do think you made a good point. How are our counterparts going to view us? And are they going to be wanting to partner with us and support, projects like this? So, I feel like all of us sitting here on this probably have very similar concerns, no matter what country you're from, looking at what's happening here and how are we going to get through this? Kathy, do you want to add to that?
I think I'm thinking about my session tomorrow morning and maybe what I should have prepared for a little bit. But I think one thing that we might be doing with particularly before our students are interacting, is helping them sort of be prepared for questions they might get about the context right now in the U.S.
Mhm.
I think virtual exchange may be a really important way to continue dialogue during times when we're tending to be more isolated or there's a threat of that. So
Mhm.
I don't know. That's my thinking. I don't know if others have thoughts.
I'm really glad you asked the question, Chris,
Yeah.
because it is something we discuss quite a bit.
Thank you. I appreciate your thoughts.
Mhm.
If I may say, from personal experience, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I'm Jamie. I'm at Bluefield State University in West Virginia. We recently put together a very a small grant that encouraged us to partner with our international partners.
Mhm.
So I reached out to all of them, and of course, because some of these relations have been dormant for a while, 7 of the 15 responded,
Mm.
and they were very happy simply to hear from me. And I'm sure your partners are also very happy to know you are still friends and so on, because
Mhm.
your relationship means far more to them than what's happening at the political level. So I would just simply say to all of you, I'm sure all of you have partners, you have friends, and I would sustain those ties and let them know that we are still here. We care very much for each other and for the well-being of our students, and that we will plod on no matter what, you know.
Thank you for that comment. That is very encouraging for all of us. And I think that's, if we can use that as our focus, that, can kind of keep us focused and going in the right direction. But I do like that you said they need to know we're all friends and we're all working together, and we want that to continue.
There's a question in the chat, I think about terminology. So is COIL an approach, or is it a program you need to enroll in to qualify as a COIL class? And I think, Vicky, you said you did COIL before you knew what it was. So
Well, I mean, you can, since he's asking about training and all, or Tracy's asking about, why don't you talk about how it's done at SU?
yeah, sure. Yeah, I missed Tracy's chat just now. So the first time, and we were just talking about, unexpected circumstances, uncertainty, and we started with COIL at Shenandoah University during the pandemic, during the COVID pandemic. And at that time, the Barzanji Institute was just a project. It was the Barzanji project. It wasn't an institute yet. And one of the main focuses of that project at the time was to connect a couple of colleges in Virginia with Muslim majority countries that were not in the Middle East. So we had partnerships in Sarajevo, and in Malaysia. And there had been some in-person collaboration going on. And then when COVID hit and we couldn't travel, Eunice and his colleagues there said, well, we were going to try out virtual exchange anyway, and now is the perfect time to do so. So they put applications out for Shenandoah professors to be involved in this inaugural COIL cohort. And myself, Vicky, Kathy were all part of that inaugural cohort. And we had an outside consultant do a workshop with us. And that was in spring of 2021. And after that, the team of faculty members, that initial cohort, developed our own workshop for the Barzanji project at Shenandoah University. So Vicky, Kathy, and I were all like faculty trainers, and then we've been involved in various capacities since then. But we basically developed our in-house workshop, initially just for us and our partners in this Barzanji project. But since then, we've expanded. The project has grown into an institute, and our workshop has grown as well. We offer it to partners that we have MOUs with, but then also just anybody. And then we're also getting into doing sort of boutique tailored workshops for folks, if at other institutions, if there's something like, oh, the School of Music wants to do a COIL workshop for music professors and things like that. So yeah, we have a workshop, but at the same time, if a faculty member at Shenandoah does a COIL, a virtual exchange, if they work with somebody in another country and they do our workshop, it's not like a licensure or certification that you have to have. But we found that faculty members who are interested in doing virtual exchange COIL, even if they've done it before, they always welcome attending a workshop, attending webinars, and just kind of developing that pedagogy. So I don't know if Vicky or Kathy, if
No,
you
that was great.
for that.
Yeah, I do want to. I know Sharif asked a question. How can we be partners between you and Arab American? I would say with the information, and Elena can put it in the chat box, definitely reach out to the Barzanji Institute, which Elena, you probably answer some of those emails.
Yes.
But
I'll put my email in the chat if
yeah, because that is something that we're definitely open to. And also with Elena, if you'll put mine and Kathy's emails in there as well, you're welcome to reach out to us as well, because we're always looking for more partners, more people to work with. So by all means, that is a partnership that can certainly be developed.
I'd also like to give a shout out, I think, to Lorette, who I met with Eunice early on, and she was sort of taught us what COIL was about. And so I thank you so much for giving us an incredible grounding in it.
So you're not opposed to training some of us who might be interested in, adopting COIL.
Oh,
Would
absolutely. I
you
mean,
train our faculty if I succeed in getting a group together? And
yeah, reach out to Elena.
what would it cost us?
Go ahead and email me. We do offer like group rates
Okay.
for institutions to do the workshop. So just send me an email.
Okay.
And I'll try to answer two questions at once about, I think the initial question about like, is there, to qualify as a COIL class. So at Shenandoah, we are interested in institutionalizing COIL more, like having courses coded as COIL courses. At the moment, we don't. So there's not really a distinction. Like if Vicky's doing COIL in one of her psychology sections and another professor is not, it would look the same. I would say when students get the syllabus, like COIL is listed somewhere on the syllabus, I'm sure, with course objectives and assignments. And then how much awareness do the students have of the COIL projects when registering for the courses? So that's the same, that unless they would talk, like unless Vicky would say, hey, I'm teaching this class next semester, we're going to do a gel workshop, like it would just be word of mouth. I don't know if Vicky, Kathy, if you want to say anything about that, like, if students were aware of doing COIL in your classes. My students were not when I did COIL.
We for these gels courses, those are electives, so students are sort of choosing to enroll, and when we give them an overview of the course, we tell them there'll be a virtual exchange or a COIL aspect to it. I know when I've done just a COIL, it was embedded into my curriculum, and it was in a required course, and yeah, it's on the syllabus.
Mm-hmm. And to be clear, the way we do it is we do it as a project embedded in the course if we're doing a COIL project. That's different than doing our blended mobility, where that actually ends up being the course. But when I'm just doing a COIL, I have my typical syllabus, but then one component of it is an assignment for points, where we're actually doing this COIL project. And it can look any way you want with your partner. And for example, the project the students do together, it may be worth 20% in my class, whereas in my partner's class, it may be worth 5%. But, we do we've learned that it's important to tie some points to it if it's embedded in a subject. Because if students think, well, this is optional, I don't know if I want to do this or not, then, you have some buy-in and some not so much. But I did mention that SUNY COIL, if you just type in SUNY COIL, they have just a great site that gives a lot of information. It's going to answer a lot of logistical type information for you. Elena, do you have any other sites that I know there's one site somebody was asking about where to find a partner?
Yeah. I mean, SUNY COIL is a network where you can find partners all over the world. I can say if you're first getting started with COIL, it might seem a little daunting. And they also do partnering fairs on Zoom. It's definitely a wide net and you can look, but my advice with SUNY COIL is to just not get intimidated by it. And then another recommendation would be to reach out to whatever kind of international or global education office at your university. Even if they do primarily in-person stuff, they can say, well, we have an MOU with this university in France or Japan or wherever, and that might be an initial first step. And then finally, some COIL training courses or workshops, including ours, can try to find you a partner. So that's one of the things that we do that's kind of unique. Like our COIL workshop is on a smaller scale than like SUNY's. And we do try to partner people. We can't always promise that we'll give you your match made in heaven, as it were, in terms of discipline. But we do have a small network of universities from around the world. And if you're not from the United States, maybe somebody at Shenandoah. So that's something that we do. So I would say SUNY COIL network, reach out, try to find somebody from your institutional partnerships. And finally, like some sort of COIL training workshop initiative where they will partner you. And also just friends, if you have colleagues or friends in other countries, or if somebody in your department does, that's, some really, I think, Vicki, you've done COIL with some of your colleague friends for sure.
I'm wondering, I just wanted to see if Lorette, since you come from SUNY, if you had anything else you wanted to share that we haven't touched on that's important.
Just because I'm from SUNY doesn't make me the expert. But
Well,
in my eyes, you are.
Does.
I have been around virtual exchange for a while. No, I think it's great the way you combined the two, and that's something that a lot of people would like to do. Combining the in-person and the virtual component. And I really am, I put it in the chat, but I really am thrilled to see how this took off at Shenandoah. That you really built it into a strong program. And now Shenandoah is recognized as leaders in virtual exchange. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, how widespread is COIL at Shenandoah? Do other faculty from other disciplines, engage, especially business, because I'm interested in trying to get our guys stirred up here.
Yeah, we have faculty from all of our schools represented in COIL. I mean, the exact number, I'm not sure of an exact percentage. I mean, probably less than half. It's not widespread, but it is like School of Business professors, conservatory, arts and sciences, health professions. It is very, all the disciplines are well represented in people who do our training. And we have some folks like Vicki and Kathy that are perennial COIL professors. We have some that successfully complete a project once or twice, and then they just kind of move on from that. I personally ended up doing a little bit of COIL in my teaching, but then I ended up moving more into the administrative end of COIL. And yeah, so we do have quite a bit of faculty that do the training, and then they continue doing COIL to varying degrees.
What motivates them? What motivates them or incentivizes them to use COIL?
I think it's a combination that they're interested in teaching and pedagogy. I found COIL training to be useful even just in my non-COIL classroom teaching. What I've heard anecdotally is if they're provided compensation, usually financial, but sometimes load release, but if they're recognized for the extra work that goes in. And I don't know, Vicki and Kathy, if what motivated you?
I just like to do it. I just am so fascinated with the type of work that goes on around the world. And that's why, before I knew there was a something called COIL, I was already reaching out, working with these partners because I think we have so much to learn from each other. And I don't want my students just to learn in a silo, if that makes sense. I want them to know there's a lot of different ways to learn, a lot of different approaches to use. And it has just, it's just been, it's just a part of what I do each year because I see so much value in it. And then that's one of the things that the students talk about on completion is, their life-changing experiences. And it really makes them come back and look at the world in a much broader way, a broader perspective. And some of them will just, participate maybe in one COIL or one blended mobility, but they will say, certain things will happen during the week and they'll go, oh, that reminds me of something I learned when I was in South Africa. Or so mine is strictly because I just love learning.
Thank you. Thank you.
I believe in the importance of it for personally and for my students. My students are working in school, are leaders in educational institutions, and having an opportunity to have an international exchange and see how other parts of the world are addressing common challenges, develop relationships. All of those pieces, I think, are vital for the profession. And I think particularly for adult learners, it may be more difficult to travel given their work responsibilities. So that is why I was drawn to COIL and then virtual exchange when I need it to be more flexible for my adult learners. Then I sort of veer into virtual exchange.
And at the time when I applied to be a COIL fellow, I was really interested in online learning. I love teaching online. And then I also was really interested in global international education and moving into that field. And so when I found COIL, I was like, wow, these are two like professional interests that I want to learn more about. So that was one of my reasons for getting into it. We are almost at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock on the East Coast, at least of the United States. So I think we could probably take maybe one more short question for Vicki and Kathy, if anybody has any concluding questions.
Okay, I'll conclude with a question. Elena, will our participants and others have access to this webinar once will it be posted somewhere so they have access?
Yes, so it is being recorded and Eunice will upload it and send it out to folks, at least folks who registered initially, and then I think he makes it publicly available too. But if you've registered for it, you'll definitely get a copy of the recording and the slides. So like the slides will be embedded in it. And yeah, I mean,
please reach out to anyone who's interested, or if you have you want to brainstorm together, we are learning as we go, so we'd love to chat.
Or if you want us to virtually meet with your faculty or people or a small group that are thinking about doing something like this, it can be just an informal meeting that we have.
And if you're interested in joining our next COIL workshop, which will be sometime in the fall, or if you want to do some sort of special COIL workshop project for your institution, I would say get in touch with me